and the IMF is sleeping over his job. We shouldn't say it. So we will continue to highlight the missteps by this government to the effect that they are trying to undo the good work we did. And we will fight to protect our legacy. Now,
all right, so that is the former finance minister there. Now, he again claimed that the government has failed to achieve several of its revenue targets for the 2025 year, insisting the government's claim of fiscal discipline is because it is unable to raise revenue.
Goods and services. The government programmed to spend 5.1 billion Ghana cedis from quarter 1 to quarter 3, but ended up spending only 3.8 billion Ghana cedis. This compares to the annual allocation of 6.7 billion Ghana cedis. The amount released for goods and services is about 56% of the total allocation for the year, yet the year has come to an end already. CAPEX. The program CAPEX for quarter 1 to quarter 3 was 26.6 billion Ghana cedis, but actual release was just 11 billion Ghana cedis. This is 34% of the total CAPEX of 32.6 billion Ghana cedis allocated for the year 2025. So when we say the minister has not been spending, we are right. The minister failed to achieve its revenue requirements. I've indicated that. They came to Parliament and they were too boastful of their revenue measures. But the reality is that they have failed. I gave you the numbers, 7.7 billion shortfall, Ghana cedis shortfall in total revenue and grants, 6.8 billion Ghana cedis shortfall in domestic revenue, 9 billion Ghana cedis shortfall in tax revenue. They couldn't achieve their revenue target. And now they come and say prudence. They were cutting down the controlling spending. How do you then spend when you cannot achieve your revenue?
Well, we're joined by our parliamentary affairs correspondent, Kweku Asante, who has been in Parliament for this development and joins me with more details. Kweku, the minority also spoke about investors and a poor verdict on the NDC's management of the economy. Really,
well, yes, Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam has been talking about the various auctions, the government trying to raise revenue on the local market. And he says investors have been voting with their feet. In fact, that is his exact words, that because the government has been failing to achieve its optimal targets on the market when it's gone out there to go and raise funds from the market, he says it is clear testament that investors are not very happy with the way the economy is going, and that is why they are not willing to put their money in the economy.
The minister, members of the press, also conveniently fails to mention the disastrous auction performance throughout 2025. Market participants have delivered a devastating verdict on the administration's economic management through their systematic avoidance of government securities. Out of 45 auctions conducted this year, an unprecedented 25 have failed outright, a failure rate exceeding 55%. That reveals not just market skepticism, but active rejection of government paper. Investors are voting with their feet and their capital, demonstrating a clear preference for short-term instruments over any long-term commitments to a government they no longer trust, just 10 months since they assumed office. This pattern of auction failures has created a vicious cycle. Each failed auction forces the government to rely more heavily on expensive short-term borrowing, which in turn increases rollover risk and further undermines investor confidence. The cumulative shortfalls of 17.5 billion Ghana cedis represent not just a financing gap, but a vote of no confidence in the government's ability to manage the economy sustainably. The stock market's reaction during this budget presentation week provides additional damning evidence of this confidence crisis. This week,
so that was the former finance minister, Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam there. What's next on the budget?
Yeah, so this weekend, MPs will converge at a hotel. I think it will be Alisa Hotel, where they'll be having a post-budget workshop. The conversation now is whether or not it will be residential or not. I think the decision as of this morning was that it will not be residential. MPs would have to come and go between tomorrow and then Monday. They will meet the finance minister. They will meet experts who will detail or dovetail into the budget and get an understanding of what it actually means. And then the House will again resume on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, the budget debate will start. It will go on for about 2 weeks. While that is all happening, the various committees will be sitting on the various estimates of the ministries, departments, and agencies. And then ultimately, it will culminate in the approval of the appropriation before Christmas.
And yesterday, we saw some bills being laid.
Yeah.
Were all the bills that are related to this budget laid, or some were?
Yes, all of them have been laid. In fact, yesterday, the finance minister did all of that before he joined advancements on PM Express. And so those ones have also been referred to the finance committee, the economic committee, budget, depending on what exactly this is going to be about. But of course, the key one is the COVID-19 repeal levy that people are looking forward to. But the finance minister insists, and he's adamant that the committees will be able to work on this. They will approve of it as part of the total appropriation package.
All right. Thank you very much, Kojo. This is a top story brought to you by Telecel Connect and Energies, Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil. Enjoy a holy sleep, and also by Shield Pension Trust into the future with you. Let's do more on this particular story by bringing in Professor Godfred Bokbin. He is economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. Now, let's start from the claim the minority makes about the fiscal discipline that government claims is because it cannot raise revenue. Is that the case?
Yeah. Good evening, and good evening to our service. Lower interview or join. Yeah. Hello.
Prof, I'm with you, Prof.
Okay. So thank you very much. To a large extent, expenditure containment is driven largely by revenue underperformance. The good news under this current administration is that domestic revenue mobilization constrains them from spending excessively, which is a deviation from what we have seen in the last couple of years, or let me put it, one and a half decades or so. You will realize when you look at the trend, the fiscal, in the last 15 years or so, you observe that low domestic revenue mobilization does not constrain Ghana government from spending the way they want to spend. Because the difference between the high expenditure and low revenue envelope is explained through borrowing. So once the borrowing option is available, regardless of how much revenue we are able to raise, does not constrain Ghana government from spending the way they want to spend, with all the inefficiency and the corruption that comes along with it. But you will see a positional shift under this administration where they are working hard to live within their means, to the extent that revenue shortfall is explained not through higher borrowing, but rather through higher expenditure cuts in order to meet the fiscal target, especially in terms of the primary balance of 1.5% of GDP, which is very high. And then again, if you look at the primary balance on cash basis, they are doing 0.7% of GDP. So that is the approach this government has adopted. Does it have a side effect, a negative effect? The answer is yes. So, this is like a patient who is seriously sick. You are looking at the optimal treatment. There is one that when you administer, the patient will get well quicker. But the side effect is very huge. So, or you want to say that, okay, let's manage this patient over a long period of time so that we don't administer more of the doses that will cause higher side effects, so to speak. So what is the side effect under this strategy government has adopted? Now, when you go back to the same budget, hello?
Problem with you.
When you go back to the same budget, you realize that if you look at GDP from the expenditure point of view, GDP is driven more by private or household consumption rather than government. It's good news that household level expenditure has picked up, in fact, actually by more than 8%, or call it private consumption. But the government is the biggest consumer along many layers.
But Prof,
so when the biggest consumer is not spending optimally, it has implications for growth. So you realize that with the exception of first quarter government consumption, which was very high, from the second quarter to the third quarter, government consumption shrunk significantly to about 0.2%. That is what we call side effect. In the immediate, we all agree with government that the fiscal recalibration, moving from revenue-based expenditure consolidation to expenditure-based revenue fiscal consolidation, is the best way to go. So in the immediate, that will have a bite in terms of the side effects. And the trade-off will be growth. The trade-off will be jobs. But in the medium to the long term, depending on how government recalibrates the fiscal framework, we will begin to then spend progressively in order to engineer growth and create jobs. So that is a trade-off we have to manage. The next important question is whether government is overdoing these expenditure cuts. Hello,
I am with you, sir.
The next question is whether government is overdoing these expenditure cuts or the shock therapy, they are over-administering it. Evidence suggests that government seems to be on the extreme side of the shock therapy in terms of the strict expenditure containment rather than maybe striking a good balance simply because they don't want to overborrow now and cause dislocations in the economy. So that is a dilemma where we are. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the 2025 budget allocation and you look at CAPEX, it's your spending in the area of CAPEX that will drive job-rich growth. The total allocation so far, you realize that we have spent just around 13 billion Ghana cedis. That is less than maybe, or if we use the current exchange rate, the average is less than $1 billion. We are saying that in order to close the infrastructure gap, annually we need to spend like $10 billion annually for the next 5-10 years in order to close the infrastructure gap. So given the enormity of the challenge, the infrastructure deficit, and the pace at which we are going, certainly certain questions will show up.
Okay.
And that is where we are in terms of the trade-off. But you cannot force the government so much now because we need to calm the economy.
Okay.
It's coming at a great cost. But the pace of the fiscal consolidation has been too sharp or aggressive for the economy's own containment. And therefore, you will see from here, you will see that in the 2026 budget, there is an attempt to scale up.
But Prof, is this fiscal discipline a sustainable one, or it's because we have an IGP, the IMF, that is policing activities by the government?
We have been there before. 2017, 2018, if you see the outlook, when we were under IMF-supported program, of course, the approach the government adopted was different from this one. But we need to understand where we have come from in the run-up to 2024 election, where the whole IMF program had been thrown overboard, essentially, off the track, with the exception of international reserves and GDP growth which consistently outperformed the program target, we failed on almost all the other indicators, both the indicative targets, continuous performance targets, and the structural benchmarks. We failed along all those lines. So maybe it is fair to say government deserves some credit in using just 1 year budget to restore the fiscal to the position where we are and all of that. But we all agree, and the Minister of Finance, in fact, recently, the Governor of Bank of Ghana admitted that the stability they call stability, we don't call it stability. That's a disruption. It has come at a great cost, and the cost is showing on their balance sheet. So government deserves some credit in how they recalibrated the fiscal framework, complement that with the monetary side. But we need to admit also that this shock therapy that government has administered has come along its way with a huge side effect that needs to be managed. Because this is not 100 meters. This is a marathon. Managing an economy is not like running 100 meters. It's a long journey. Government will have to then look at how they will move this recalibration in terms of begin to progressively spend going forward as enabled by the fiscal space.
Okay.
So the whole issue is that the fiscal space had been constrained and all of that. And it's also good for me. Look, let me put it on record. If you will recall, when COVID struck, our recommendation to Ghana government then was that instead of introducing different taxes and adjusting the tax rate to burden the economy, choose the path of expenditure cuts. We strongly recommended that from 2021, government needed to switch from revenue-based fiscal consolidation to expenditure-based fiscal consolidation to exit the challenges that confronted the country. There were those who said that there was no way we could cut expenditure. It was not impossible. But you find another administration within the shortest possible time, they did what we felt was not possible, and the total control. But of course, that has come at a price. Do we have many options? I would say no.
So is it the argument that when government starts to, spend, let's say pay the debt that we rearranged and all of that, we may probably not be seeing the levels of development or the growth that we are seeing today?
Hello, can you come again?
I'm asking that, is it then, can we then assume that if government starts to spend, pay the debts that we rearranged, try to say that, okay, give us some more time to start paying back and all of that, will we see the same levels of growth we're seeing?
No, I think that we have to find a way of restructuring the arrears.
Okay.
I think we should be fair to government because a lot of these arrears would have delivered whatever growth they were intended for. Do you get the point?
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
So for the kind of growth that this government is looking for, we need to empower them with the necessary resources to spend in the right areas so that the growth can come from. Because a lot of these areas we are talking about, really the level of inefficiency and the corruption and all of that. In fact, when you get to see the Auditor General's report, you cannot disagree so much with the minister. We need to find a balance.
Okay.
But we should also understand, hello?
I'm with you, Prof.
We said at the beginning of this year that IMF inspired growth projections. The growth you are seeing here is not so much of NDC growth. These are projected growth under the IMF supported program. And we had maintained that the IMF inspired growth projections are insufficient to lift millions of Ghanaians out of poverty. That is very clear. So my understanding is that going forward, we have to be able to recalibrate the fiscal framework and spend progressively with the necessary efficiency so that we can drive growth, let's say around 9.5%, 11% consistently. That will lift millions of Ghanaians out of poverty. The growth we are seeing right now is woefully insufficient. Then again, if you look at the growth drivers, with the exception of agriculture, if you look at the main drivers of the growth, they didn't come as a result of government spending. Growth that is driven by ICT, the service sector, is growth that is driven more for private consumption and expenditure. Okay, so of course, when it comes to agriculture, we've seen from crops, fisheries, and the rest of them. But if you look at total budgetary allocation this year, it's insufficient to actually drive the necessary growth that we see.
Okay. Prof, do stay with me. I'll bring you back in, but let me go to Parliament now. I'm bringing the Vice Chairperson, Economy and Development Committee, Kofi Ako Noku. I'm grateful to you, sir, for joining us here. The minority is right to say that the auction that that people are not picking in terms of government trying to raise revenue from the domestic front, the government is not meeting its target. It means that it's a vote of no confidence in the economy. Isn't the minority right when they bring up this argument?
Thank you, Kojo. But at this point, how can you say that the minority is right?
I'm asking you a question. You probably say whether they are right or not.
I'm even disappointed that my colleague, the ranking member for the finance committee, would be able to hold such a press conference. This is the same man that had the opportunity to be the finance minister. The same people that confronted this country with a debt, a mismanagement of 68.8 billion Ghana cedis. This was unaccounted for. An economy that we inherited with so much mismanagement. And that is why I just wonder why they cannot realize why over 1.6 million Ghanaians voted against them. Kojo, the magic you are seeing today is not just a magic that was just concocted from somewhere. We're talking about physical discipline. And that is why Prof. Bokin has said it all. This is prudent management, Kojo. And that is why the government was able to slow spending over 3.7%, Kojo, will stabilize the city. Brought inflation, which was 23.7 plus, to a single digit. So food inflation, I always make reference to food inflation because that is what the ordinary Ghanaian in the market can relate to. What was the cost of a bag of rice, Kojo, in December 2024? And that is why I make a case that you go to my regional capital, which is Takrady, the woman at Market Circle, who used to sell a bag of rice at about 1,000 cedis as of December 2024, Kojo is selling the same rice for 520 cedis. See, and that is why Prof. Bokin was able to say that household income consumption has increased. And Kojo, that is what we're talking about. I'm happy even about the energy sector with the negotiations we've started, which is saving this country, Kojo, over $250 million. Why would he say that IMF is quiet? Why wouldn't IMF be quiet when IMF is witnessing prudent management? Look at what the grading that Moody has come out with. S&P, look at them. So why would they doubt us? Kojo, I believe this point, they ought to be a minority that understands the situation, that wishes well for Ghana, that is optimistic because speculations doesn't help. They should support us to fix the mess they created. In a space of 10 months, look at the difference we've caused. You know? So that is what it is. Okay. So at a point, they feel that they should always hold press conferences. But that is not the only duty of a minority group in Parliament.
Okay, all right. But Kofi Akonoko, I'm grateful to you for joining us. He's Vice Chair, Person on Economy and Development Committee. Professor Bokping, what can we say will account or is accounting for government's inability to meet its target in terms of domestic revenue mobilization?
Okay, thank you very much. So, of course, certain revenue handles have disappeared, but you can also see the impact of the aggressive strengthening of the currency on the government revenue envelope. You recall the Commissioner General of DRA saying at some point, I think in the second quarter to the third quarter of this year, that the CD's aggressive strengthening has affected almost 30% of the revenue envelope. You will recall, right? Yeah. So when you have that situation, together with other revenue handles, government-owned expenditure also shrunk. So that again is going to affect certain revenue handles. And then from the export sector, with the exception of, remember that even though we've seen a surge in gold prices and the effect from artisanal small scale gold that we buy through gold board, those foreign exchange are not manifesting explicitly in additional revenue for us because all that we are getting from this gold export is just a foreign exchange component. The tax component is very low, so we are not benefiting optimally. Okay, and those are the issues that we need to look at going forward. Generally, when the economy itself is expanding broadly and different jobs are being created, when you have growth, that is job rich. That growth, that is job rich, will also deliver revenue for the government because a lot of people will be employed. It will be on payee, income tax will go up. It will also strengthen their consumption and all of that. But the bigger issue with our revenue is the fact that we are not growing a taxable economy. So, for instance, if you pick agriculture and you even say that agriculture grew in the first 3 quarters averagely by, let's say, 6% or so, that growth from agriculture is not taxable because the whole agriculture sector and its contribution to GDP has averaged about 20% in the last 15 years or so. Meanwhile, the tax potential from that has been less than 1%. So we are not growing a taxable economy for that economy to deliver sufficient tax revenue. So anytime we want to raise more tax revenue, then we need to deepen the rate of building a faithful few. I'll give you an example. Agriculture, its contribution to tax revenue is less than 1%. Meanwhile, in Ivory Coast, our neighbors here, Cote d'Ivoire, agriculture and its contribution to GDP is around 17%. But agriculture delivers close to 10% of their tax revenue. It's because of the approach they have adopted with respect to commercial farming, large-scale farm. Do you know that in this country, we have been importing palm oil from Cote d'Ivoire and a lot of things. So we need to have a strategy to grow a taxable economy that can deliver the tax revenue that we desire. You just can't throw things everywhere without being strategic with the level of efficiency and expect that the economy will be favorable to you and all of that. Of course, the other thing we have also observed is that this country, there are just too many leakages in this economy. The World Bank did a study. Our own study also confirms so that corporate income tax, the level of inefficiency there is more than 80%. Even when you talk about VAT, the level of inefficiency in our VAT system is more than 45%. You don't close that gap by increasing the VAT rate. You close that gap through administrative reform and compliance. And here, even though the Minister of Finance has done well, I want to express my disagreement with respect to the VAT reform they have done. I congratulate them for eliminating COVID-19 health levy and all of that. But pegging the standard VAT rate at 20% will be counterproductive. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In Nigeria, the standard VAT rate is 7.5%. Once our CD strengthens, it favors smuggling from Nigeria. Because if you do the pricing differential, you are far better off buying imported malt, so to speak, that is smuggled or imported through Nigeria than the malt that is actually produced in Ghana here. Because the price differential is more than 35%. So, and then we need to look at what is happening within the regional economy and our regional peers and then our structural peers. So, for instance, across our structural peers, you'll find the average standard VAT rate to be around 18%. In fact, 18% is consistent with our own study that the optimal VAT rate for Ghana is 18%. Now, this is what it means. If you go beyond the 18%, 1% increase above 18% causes growth to come down by more than 1.5%. This is empirically done. So I had sent a memo, I had indicated earlier that they should peg it at 18%. In fact, you get more revenue from VAT, not through higher rates. but through lower rates and higher compliance. Lower rates would encourage higher compliance. In this country, again, let me give you another example.
So, Prof,
the GRA is listening.
Prof,
So,
I wanted to ask you. So does it mean then that the target of government may not be realized because of the rate?
Partly so. Even though it's better now than a year or 3 years ago, because they have now merged the straight levy with the standard VAT rate and peg it at 20%. So there's a recovery aspect in terms of the input cost. So I congratulate them for reforming the VAT and correcting the distortions that have been created in the last couple of. So that is good. But I was saying that if you want to do something, then do it very well and peg it where it will be optimal, especially as we want to go for growth. Remember, the end result of production is consumption. But where is the bigger issue? In the last 25 years, an aspect of the economy that has expanded so much is wholesale and retail, where you see shopping malls across, largely importing items from China, India, and the rest of them. Even though the wholesale and retail contribute close to 16% of our GDP, the tax contribution from that sector is actually less than 4%. So what it means is that meanwhile, along this wholesale and retail, that is where consumption tax are positioned or is positioned. So it is possible that people are charging VAT, but they are not remitting the VAT to GRA the way they should. And therefore, there should be greater compliance and audit, especially with big wholesale firms, shops, malls, and the rest of them that are supposed to be VAT registered. When they charge the VAT all right. They charge you and I when we go and buy. But the question is, do they transfer that amount actually to GRA the way they are supposed to? We need to ensure that there's greater compliance on that. If we can focus on that compliance, I'm sure a lower rate will deliver more revenue. And I'm sure the Minister of Finance is aware of this. I had heard on a different platform where he had indicated that if the revenue performance improves, it's likely to bring the rate down. That tells me that the minister is conscious of this, and therefore he's looking at the data. I think under the 24-hour economy, we must do everything possible to stimulate consumption as a way of also increasing production, because what we need is not prices to come down because we are suppressing consumption. We need to increase production so that with excess production or more production, prices will come down. That will be more sustainable going forward. There are hard choices for us to make, and I pray that we get the courage to take make these choices.
When government rolls out efforts to get T-bills and they are undersubscribed, is that a vote of no confidence from the private sector that we're not interested in buying?
No, I am not looking at it from that point.
Okay.
I have told you, I indicated in my earlier submission that government is explaining low revenue through higher expenditure cuts rather than just borrowing to cover the difference.
So is that strategic on the part of government?
Yeah, that is strategic. That is strategic. I mean, I will not fault government so much on that one. Remember, treasury bill rate had to come down significantly, and that itself is not attractive to the market, okay, in terms of market players. But in terms of in the immediate, as the approach that they have adopted with the shock therapy, reducing gross financing needs, and you remember that government is not looking only to the short-term market in closing the financing gap. They've also mopped up excesses from certain state-owned enterprises that have excess balances under the Treasury Single Account System under the Public Financial Management Act as a way of also managing its refinancing in the immediate. So it's more of a strategy. My expectation is that going forward, they will begin to normalize this, and you'll see that the rates in the market will begin to align. Remember, the Minister of Finance was quick to show to you that the shock therapy they have administered has resulted in the savings of about 8.8 billion Ghana cedis. You heard that, right? Through the slower borrowing and the rate that has come down and all of that. So they've had to do so many things in order to keep to the fiscal target under the IMF-supported program.
All right.
But we know that going forward, they will need to recalibrate the framework and begin to also spend progressively nobody will tell them. By the middle of 2027, the feeling will be there. Constituencies will be making demands. The honeymoon effect of a new administration would have been neutralized or utilized. Now you face the reality.
Okay, all right. I'm grateful to you, Professor Godfred Buckping, an economist and professor of finance, University of Ghana Business School, for joining us here. This has been Top Story, brought to you by Telecel, Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil, and Shield Pension Trust. Up next is Ghana Connect.